All right, so we are on Lamed Zayin Lamed Beis 37b. It says, promised yesterday, we're going to try to understand what's the meaning behind this breakdown of the math, of the numbers. So let's just review quickly the breakdown of numbers as described by the Gemara. So the Gemara tells us the first 4 is broken down into 2 sets of 2. Blessing and curse. And each of those are broken into 2, blessing and curse. And they're broken down into 2 because there's the general, bless is the one who serves God, curse is the one who doesn't serve God. That's one set of those 2, the general, and then the specific. Blessed is the one who fulfills X mitzvah. Cursed is the one who fails to perform X mitzvah. Which means, therefore, every mitzvah has these 4 covenants. General blessing, general curse, specific blessing, specific curse. That's the first set of 4. Yes, that's right. That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Now those 4 are applied 4 times for each mitzvah. They're applied 4 times for each mitzvah. Because every mitzvah has 4 components. To learn about it, 1. To teach about it, 2. To perform it, 3. To guard it, 4. Right? And the Gemara divided those 4 into 2. Teach, learn, perform, guard. And the Gemara divided those, following? Yeah. The Gemara divided those 4 into 2. First, that which is related to Torah, learning and teaching. Yeah. And then secondly, related to the mitzvah itself, perform and guard. So then each of those 2 are 8, because each of those 2 take the 4 original, the general blessing, general curse, specific blessing, specific curse. Following? Yeah. And then the Gemara said 8 and 8 make 16.
So each of these 4 subparts breaks into.
Each of those 4 are applied to all 4 of those. But those 4 are divided into 2 categories. 2 related to learning, 2 related to Torah, learning and teaching, 2 related to the mitzvah, perform and guard. And each of those take all 4 of the covenants. So making each mitzvah in its totality be 16. Right? 4 blessings and curses for learning, 4 blessings and curses for teaching, 4 blessings and curses for performing, and 4 blessings and curses for guarding, giving us 16. Right? Now that 16 are broken down into 2 sets of 8.
Oh, I see. So general has 4, specific has 4.
The other way. Learning has all 4. The general curse, thou shalt learn. The specific, thou shalt not learn. The specific blessing, thou shalt learn. Thou shalt serve God. Right? I'm going to word it again. The 4 blessings and curses. General blessing, blessed is the one who serves God. Specific blessing, blessed is the one who performs X mitzvah. General curse, curse is the one who does not serve God. Specific curse, curse is the one who fails to do X mitzvah. All those 4 apply to all 4 elements of every mitzvah. So the learning element.
Teach, learn, perform, and guard.
That's right. Each of those 4 are incorporative in the general blessing, right? Thou shalt serve God. And they're also in a specific.
Just like this, just repeated. Oh. General,
that's right.
And then the specific, this again, repeated, this again.
Okay, that's one way of doing it. Or more precisely, each of these 4 have this.
Okay.
Following?
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm doing that is because it's not as if it's not correct to say that the general, well, okay, let's get to understanding. Okay. You see why I'm saying that? Why better apply the 4 blessings and curses to each of the 4 categories rather than take the 4 categories of learn, teach, perform an act and stick them into the curses. It's the other way.
Yeah.
Right? So let's break down what they mean, and then I think we'll understand. The numbers will break down better when you understand what's behind it, which is what we're trying to attempt to do today. So let's start with the general and the specific, and the blessing and the curse. What's the blessing? What's the ultimate blessing? What's at the core and the essence of every blessing? The core and the essence of every blessing is a closeness to Hashem. That's the core of every blessing. Closeness to Hashem. What's the core and the essence of all curse? A distance from Hashem. Right? So the core and the essence of a blessing, blessed is the one who does mitzvahs, is a closeness with Hashem. And the essence of the curse of one who, God forbid, doesn't perform is a distance from Hashem. All the actual blessings and the actual curses described in the Torah are just a consequence. If one is close to Hashem, then his life is well, there's blessings and so on. When is different from Hashem is all the opposite. But the essence of blessing and curse is closeness to Hashem or distance from Hashem. This closeness to Hashem and this distance from Hashem causes the following reaction in terms of the way we serve God. The closeness to Hashem achieved via mitzvahs is what engenders a love of Hashem. Right? Love is a desire to be close. That's what love is. Love is the desire to be close, or the experience of being close, if it's a deeper love, if you're really close to your beloved. The feelings of love are to be drawn close to the object or the item of your love. Sorry? That's right. So the blessing is the net result of love. Right? And therefore love promotes the performance of mitzvahs. I have this deep desire to get close. I get close via the performance of mitzvahs. And now I have the blessing, which is the closeness. Following? Now, the distance from God, the fact that sin brings a distance from God, that engenders the awe, the fear of God. What's the fear of God? It's the fear of losing God. It's the flip side of love. If love is, I want to be close, then I fear losing the person. And therefore I won't do anything to mess up that relationship. Following? Every relationship has this. It's the love in the relationship and the respect in the relationship. I can love someone, but if I don't respect their boundaries, I'm going to lose them. So there's the love. I want to get closer, and that motivates doing for the other. And then there is the fear. I don't want to lose the relationship. And that motivates not to violate the other. So love motivates the performance of mitzvahs. I want to be close to Hashem, and the mitzvahs are the means to get to that closeness. And I fear losing my relationship with God, and therefore I'm not going to do anything He asked me not to.
Oh, so that's not the
It's the core of the curse. It is the core of the curse. The curse is you're going to lose the relationship. That's the curse. The curse being a distance from God. So I avoid the curse in fear of losing God, which is the curse. Right? I'm afraid of the curse. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of losing God. And therefore I will not do anything you don't want me to. Right? So you have blessing, love, performance of mitzvahs on the right side. Then you have on the left side, the fear of the curses / distance from God, and thus preventing the failure to do the wrong thing. The love and the fear in the relationship with God. The blessing, the result of the love. I'm closer to God now that I love Him and I perform what He has to. And because I fear losing Him, I avoid all the curses. And therefore, I don't do anything He asked me not to do. Now, in every mitzvah, you have two components. The general and the specific. What's the general? The general is the common theme for every mitzvah. What's the common theme for every mitzvah? No matter what the mitzvah is, it brings closeness to God. No matter what the sin is, it brings distance from God. It's the general. That parallels the general blessing and the general curse. Blessed is the one who serves God, without getting the specifics of what kind of blessing, what kind of closeness, or what kind of mitzvah, because it makes no difference. The point is, it's God's command. And if it's God's command, it brings closeness to him, irrespective of what the command happens to be. The general blessing. But then there's a specific. This mitzvah brings you closeness in X fashion. Tefillin connects the mind. Tzitzis is the hug. Shabbos brings a connection in this manner. Yom Tov in that manner. So every mitzvah has the specific blessing and the general blessing. Every mitzvah has the general blessing because it doesn't make a difference what kind of mitzvah it is. God commanded it, it's closeness. That's the general blessing. But then every mitzvah has a specific blessing. What kind of connection is forged here? And the same thing with the opposite. There's the general curse. You're disconnected from God. Doesn't make a difference what you did, how you did it. The point is he asked you not to and you did it. So the disconnect. That's the general fear, the general curse. I don't want to disconnect. How I disconnect? What's the difference? I don't want to disconnect, period. The commonality between all sin is a disconnect. But then there is a specific kind of disconnect. Failure to put on tefillin disconnects the mind. Failure on Shabbos disconnects in this fashion. So there's the specific and the general. And the same thing is true in love. I love Hashem, and if I want to be close to him, it doesn't make a difference what mitzvah I do. I just want to be close to you. But then there is, I appreciate the closeness that this mitzvah brings me. Same thing with the fear. I'm afraid of disconnecting, period. So it doesn't make a difference what sin it is. I don't want to do any because I don't want to be disconnected. And then there is, I'm afraid of this specific disconnect caused by this specific sin. So now you can see how every mitzvah has all four. Has 4 points of relationship. 2 in the positive, 2 in the negative. 2 in the positive on the love side. I love the connection. Doesn't make a difference what kind. Number 1. Number 2, I love the specific connection this mitzvah forges. That's the general blessing, the specific blessing. Then there is, I'm afraid of disconnect from you. Doesn't make a difference what type of disconnect it is. That's the general curse. And then the specific curse. I am afraid of this specific disconnect. Now, in every mitzvah, even though I divided love and fear just now into do and don't do. So from this perspective, you would imagine all the positive commandments fall on the blessing side. The performance, I love God, and therefore I want to do for you. And if I want a connection to you, that blessing. And all of the negative commandments, thou shalt not do, on the fear side, I'm afraid of losing you, and therefore I don't want to do anything to violate our relationship, and therefore I'm not going to do any of the prohibitions, and therefore avoid the curse, avoid the disconnect. That's true, generally speaking. That's true. But when you zoom in, every single mitzvah is both a positive and a negative. Explain how. Putting on tefillin. It's a positive commandment. Put on a tefillin, and that makes a relationship with God. So the primary motivator, as it were, for tefillin is the love component. I want to connect to you on a general sense. I want to connect to you specifically in the manner that tefillin makes me connect to you, and therefore I'm putting them on to forge that connection, to get that blessing, the general and the specific. But that too has an element of fear. Because even in a positive commandment, there's a failure to fail to do it. There's a fear to fail to do what I have to. So even in the positive commandment, there's an element of a negative.
Failing to do it.
The failing to do it is a negative. That's right. So even though the primary motivator is I love you and therefore I want to connect with you, there's also a part of fear. I don't want to lose out on this connection opportunity.
Right.
And the same thing is true on the other side.
Positive commandment has 4 components.
There we go. There we go. Now the negative commandment, even though primarily the negative commandment is the fear of the curse, the fear of the disconnect on the 2 levels, general, I don't want to disconnect from you. And then I don't want to disconnect you in this specific way. But there's also the positive. The positive of the negative commandment is I am positively going to control myself because I love you and don't want to ruin. So even the negative has a positive commandment element to it. I really want to eat that. But because I love you, that's the positive. Therefore, I'm afraid of losing you, the negative, and therefore I'm going to positively control myself and not eat that. So even though the dominant force of the refraining from sin is the fear of losing the connection, the fear of God, the fear of losing the connection. But that fear of losing your connection is itself built on because I love you. So there's a positive. That is the two, guard and perform. Every mitzvah has the perform and the guard. Whether it's a negative commandment and therefore its dominant here is the guard and its four components, or whether it's a positive commandment where the dominant is the perform with its four components, the general and specific, but they all include each other. Every mitzvah, whether it's positive or negative, has both the performance and the guarding, the love and the fear, and the love and the fear itself is broken down into the four categories. And the same thing is true of the learning and the teaching. In fact, in some ways, in the learning and the teaching, it's easier to see this. Right?
Each of the positive and negative commands
have all four.
They have all four.
Whether it's do or guard, they have the general and the specific. Because no matter what you're doing,
teach, learn, perform, and guard.
The four elements. Whether you're teaching, learning, performing, or guarding, you have all four elements of the blessing and the curses. Because no matter what kind of mitzvah it is, or what element of mitzvah it is, you always have both the element of love, I want to attach to you, and the element of fear, I don't want to detach from you. The blessing and the curse. Whether it's a positive commandment and therefore the love is dominant, or whether it's a negative commandment and therefore the fear is dominant, but they both work together always, even if one is more dominant than the other. Right?
That's why you said to put those on top.
I understand exactly right.
I always had it on the bottom.
Exactly right. That's why I was saying, take these four. That's right.
Elements and break them into
the four blessings and curses. That's right. So once you understand what the blessings and curses are, and you can see how the blessings and curses apply to each category. Because in each category, you have the love and the fear. You have the blessing of getting close and the curse of not being disconnected on the general and the specific.
Because these things are action driven.
There you go.
Garden.
That's right.
So that's why you have.
That's right. They're that's right.
Doing those things or not.
That's right.
Doing what you're not supposed to.
That's right.
You have to keep in mind what connections you're forming.
That's correct. So whether you're teaching, whether you're learning, whether you're performing, whether you're guarding, there's four connections made.
Right.
There's the connection made of I'm following what you want. That's a general connection. There's a specific connection created through that action. There's the general fear, I don't want to disconnect. And there's specific fear, I don't want to disconnect in this fashion. Whichever one's dominant, whether what's dominant is the fear of losing out, which is the negative commandments, or whether what's dominant is the desire to get close, the blessing, which is the positive commandments, they still always have each other. Because even in positive commandments, there's the fear of not doing it, of losing the connection. And even in the don't eat, there's the positive self-control I need because I love you. Right? So you always have, no matter what element of the mitzvah you're doing, whether you're learning, teaching, performing, or guarding, you always have these four. Right? So with the learning and the teaching, in some ways, it's easier to see this, right? Because when you're learning, let's just start with learning, right? So in learning, there's these two components, which is, I love you, and therefore I want to get to know you and be close to you. From that perspective, does it make a difference what part of Torah I'm learning? What's the difference with what part of Torah I'm learning? The point is I'm learning your Torah. So I want to connect to you.
There's general and specific.
But then there's specific. I'm getting to know you in this fashion. I'm getting to know your desire in Shabbos. I'm getting to know your desire in his. But then there's general. I just want to be connected to you. So what's the difference? What part of you I know? As long as I know you.
And also fear general.
And the same thing if fear is specific. I don't want to. The biggest fear of losing someone is not to know them. I don't want to know. I don't want to not know you. And I don't want to not know this part of you, the general, the specific. And the same thing with teaching. What's the motivation for my teaching? I want to impart the knowledge of God to the next person. Doesn't make a difference what part of knowledge of God. The point is it's God's knowledge. But then there is this person in this circumstance needs this information about Hashem. And likewise, the fear element. the knowledge of God will be lost if it's not taught. Doesn't make a difference. Which part of God's knowledge? Doesn't make a difference. The point is God's knowledge shouldn't be lost. But then there is this specific mitzvah shouldn't be lost. The information of this mitzvah. This relationship shouldn't be lost. Right? So in each of these four manners of serving Hashem, learning, teaching, performing, and guarding, you have all four elements of blessings and curses. Closeness in general, closeness in specific, and the fear of distance or the disconnect in the general and the specific. That's what I was saying. Take those four blessing curses and apply it to all four of those categories. Now, what does the Gemara tell us in final comment? The Gemara tells us that this is 3 times. 3 times. Right? They got this blessings and curses 3 times, taking us from 16 to 48. Right? Remember that from yesterday? So the 3, this is a very, this is an easy one. This is, we all know this, the chazaka is 3 times. Right? Chazaka, something is established in Jewish law when it's performed 3 times. When it's stated 3 times, it gets a certain halachic validity as a permanence, not as a transience. It's not a transient connection to God, but it's an eternal connection to God. It's a permanent connection to God. And what's being said here? The covenant was given 3 times, so each and every individual mitzvah has the full power of that in eternality. Meaning, even if I don't do it eternally, a person, God forbid, only did tefillin once, or I should rephrase that. Thank God, at least once he put on tefillin. That mitzvah, that one time he put on tefillin, has all the eternality of the 3 times the covenant was made. So like Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, that when a person does a mitzvah, even if his connection to God in his conscious self is temporary, because after he's done putting on tefillin, he forgets about it. He goes to doing his own things. But the Alter Rebbe writes, Yichud Zelamayla or Yichud Nitzri. The union he created with God above is eternal. Even if in his conscience it's not eternal because the next minute he forgot about it. But in the truth of his soul, as it is in above, it's eternal. Because every single mitzvah has the tripled vow, has the 3 times 16 covenant. Every mitzvah has that eternal permanence. Even if in my conscience I don't have it permanently, but the mitzvah itself, the connection forged with Hashem in that mitzvah itself is eternal. Or the connection forged by the fact that I controlled myself and didn't do a sin, that is eternal. That moment is eternal, even if in my conscience it's not, because later I gave in. But because of the covenant Hashem gave it, Hashem put that tripled covenant into that mitzvah, it is eternal, even if in my conscience it's not. And actually, similarly, Alter writes in Igeres HaTshuva, we read this a couple of days ago in Tanya, in our daily Tanya study, that when a sin is done 3 times, it creates a permanence, quoting the Zohar, which says that when a stain is dropped onto a material, you can wash it off. Twice, you can wash it off. But once there's 3 stains in one spot, then the stain goes from one end to the other. Right? So Hashem puts his eternal stamp by giving 3 covenants into each mitzvah. And we can do the same. When we perform mitzvahs, or God forbid the opposite, 3 times, it creates a permanence in us. Right? 3 times implying a permanence in us. So there's the challenge and the empowerment from this Gemara, from this Gemara. The empowerment is Hashem made it as such that every mitzvah has every possible forged connection you'd like to achieve in a full eternal permanence. It could be a general blessing. I just want to connect to you. It doesn't make a difference how. It could be a specific blessing. I want to connect you in this fashion. It could be a general fear. I don't want to disconnect you. It could be a specific fear. I don't want to disconnect you in this fashion. It could be a learning, teaching, performing, guarding. The whole gamut of the human experience is available in every single mitzvah, and it's eternal, with all of its eternality, that tripled seal, that stamp of the tripled covenant. The challenge to us is to indeed internalize and make that our permanence. We should be doing it 3 times. We should be invested in all these 16 covenants. The general fear, I don't want to disconnect from you. The specific fear, I don't want to disconnect you in this fashion. The general love, I want to connect to you in this fashion, no matter what it is. Right? I want to connect to you in this fashion. Connect to you through learning, through teaching, performing, through guarding. Right? So Hashem makes the full gamut of human experience available in these mitzvahs, with all of eternality, then it's our challenge to respond in kind. Right? To take on at least some, if not all of these different avenues, and to make it a permanence in this triple fashion. So this is again suggested, and obviously the floor is open for more further commentary. So God willing, tomorrow we'll see a different opinion. Here we had that the 3 times was Mount Sinai, Moab, and the mountains of Gerizim and Abel.
Is that the covenant?
That's the 3 covenants. That's the 3 times, each time 16, right?
Yeah.
And tomorrow, God willing, we're going to see a different opinion as to what the 3rd covenant was. And the opinion we learned so far yesterday of Shimon, who said that the 3rd time is the mount of the mountains where they got the blessings and the curses. And as we're going to see, there's a different opinion which says, I'm sorry, Shimon, that was the Tanakama. And we have Shimon's going to tell us tomorrow that it's not the mountains, but rather at the time when God spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu in the Mishkan. That we'll explore, God willing, tomorrow. Yeah, wonderful day.